There's a version of you that got hurt once, and instead of letting it heal right, you wrapped it. Tighter, then tighter again, and you called it discipline. Somewhere in your life, something cracked, a relationship, a failure, a season that broke you clean in half. And instead of letting it be set by someone who actually knew how bones heal, you grabbed the wrap yourself. You added a layer, then another. A new habit, a new routine. A new version of yourself, engineered overnight, reinforced daily, checked off like a box that proves you're finally becoming whole. Here's what nobody tells you. A bone that heals wrong under enough pressure doesn't stay broken. It fuses, it hardens, it becomes permanent in the wrong shape. And the tragedy isn't that you're weak. It's that you're strong enough to hold together something that was never supposed to hold itself. You've felt it, haven't you? That quiet exhaustion underneath every good morning routine post you scroll past. That sense that if you just optimized one more area, sleep, meals, prayer time, mindset, the ache underneath would finally go quiet. You're not lazy. You're not undisciplined, you're the opposite. And that's exactly what's keeping the real healer's hands off the brake. Because here's the part that should make you uncomfortable. Every layer you add yourself is a layer someone else can't remove. Every fix you engineer is a door you just nailed shut from the inside. There's a moment early in every self-repair project where it feels like relief. The first week of the new routine. The first few days it seems to be working. You sleep a little better. You feel a little more in control. That's the part nobody warns you about. The wrap actually does numb the pain for a while. It's just not healing anything underneath. It's just tightening. And tight enough for long enough starts to feel like the same thing as healed. It isn't. And here's the part that's already happening whether you notice it or not. Every day you add another layer to a wound he was trying to reset, that bone sets a little more permanently into the wrong shape. This isn't a future risk. It's happening under your hands right now, one habit tracker checkmark at a time, not dramatically, not all at once. The way most damage actually happens, quietly on schedule, disguised as progress. Something shifts when you actually watch how a broken bone heals in a hospital, not in a self-help book. The doctor doesn't ask the patient to be stronger. The doctor asks the patient to stop resisting, to go still enough that the bone can be pulled back into alignment before it's wrapped. Stillness comes before the wrap, not after. Every single time, there is no version of that process where the patient sets their own bone and calls it healing. The very idea sounds absurd in a hospital room. Somehow, in a prayer room, it sounds like maturity. But we've built a spiritual culture that skips that part entirely. We go straight to the wrap. We call it growth. We call it maturity. We call it taking responsibility for your own walk with God, and somewhere in that language, surrender quietly got rebranded as laziness. Nobody says it outright. It just gets implied, one podcast at a time, one framework at a time, until the wrap has a name and a 5-step system and a workbook to go with it. Watch what happens the next time your life cracks. Watch your own hands. Notice how fast they reach for a plan before they ever reach up. That reflex isn't a character flaw. It's just been trained. You were taught that stillness looks like giving up, and effort looks like faith, so the hands move before the heart even has time to ask who's actually supposed to be doing the healing here. Now here's where it gets stranger. The very same effort that feels like faithfulness can be the exact thing keeping your prayers feeling like they're hitting a ceiling. Not because God stopped listening, because the wound is still covered by something he didn't put there, something that has to come off before he can even see what's underneath, let alone reset it. You keep asking him to heal something you haven't actually shown him yet. It's still wrapped. It's still yours. This is the part self-help culture will never say out loud, because there's no product to sell in this sentence. Some of your most disciplined seasons were actually your most resistant ones. The tighter you gripped the plan, the less room existed for anything you didn't already control. And control, dressed up as diligence, still blocks the same door. A closed fist looks the same whether it's holding a sin or a spreadsheet. So the pressure builds, you add one more habit, one more system, one more version of yourself that's supposed to finally be enough, and instead of feeling closer to whole, something inside starts to feel more brittle. Not because you're failing, because a wound wrapped tighter without ever being set doesn't strengthen, it calcifies, and calcified pain doesn't hurt any less. It just stops moving. It goes quiet in the worst way, the way a nerve goes quiet right before it dies, not right before it heals. There's a night that shows up in almost every story like this, a night where the plan stops working. Not because you did it wrong, because it was never built to hold. You lie there and realize the ache is still exactly where it was the day it started, just buried under more effort now, harder to even locate. You've gotten so good at managing it that you've almost forgotten what it would feel like to actually be free of it. That night is not a failure. That night is an invitation, because it's the first time in a long time your hands finally stop moving long enough for someone else's hands to reach the wound at all. Everything you built to protect yourself has to go still before anything real can happen. That stillness will feel, at first, exactly like the thing you've spent years being taught to avoid. Here's the moment everything reorganizes. The healing was never asking you to try harder. It was asking you to go still enough to be touched. Grace isn't the reward at the end of enough effort. Grace is what happens the second effort finally stops gripping the wound, and stillness is not the same thing as giving up. Stillness is what surgery requires. You don't operate on a patient who's still fighting to hold their own bone in place. The moment you actually loosen your grip, not abandon the healing, just stop being the one performing it, is the exact moment the real hands can move. And what those hands do isn't a patch, it's a reset. It's slower than your routine, it's more honest than your habit tracker, and it's the only version of healed that actually holds weight when life presses on it again. You start to notice it in small ways first. A moment of rest that doesn't feel like failure anymore. A prayer that isn't a to-do list disguised as devotion. A quiet where you're not performing wholeness, you're just finally letting it be built into you instead of by you. The exhaustion that used to sit underneath every good habit starts to lift, not because the habit changed, but because you're no longer the one holding the whole structure up alone. The wrap comes off slower than it went on. That's normal. Bones set by someone else always take longer to trust than the ones you rushed yourself. There will be days it still aches in the old place, and you'll want to reach for the wrap again out of pure muscle memory. That reflex doesn't mean you've undone anything. It just means the old pattern is still fading, one honest moment at a time. But what heals this way holds. It holds in whether the self-made kind never could. And here's the thread you'll want to pull on long after this ends. Because the same hands that reset what's broken in you are already working on something you haven't even noticed cracked yet. The next ache you feel isn't a sign you failed again. It might be the first honest signal in years that something is finally being touched instead of managed. What you do with that signal next is the difference between another layer of wrap and finally letting the bone be set the way it was always meant to heal.